Okay, so
It'll get you there.
item one,
Item one.
goodbye, and thank you so much for your service, President Jimmy Carter.
Seriously, national
What a
treasure.
national treasure. He is definitely a national treasure. He's one of the best presidents we've ever had, in my opinion. And, you
Well,
know, the
I would say the best person,
best person to be a president.
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
you're like a teeny tiny bit older than me. Do you remember his administration? Do you remember
I
do you have any
remember the only thing I remember his administration was sitting around the dinner table when Iran turned into a theocracy, and all of a sudden, all of our the Shah of Iran was deposed, and it went from a modern society to a fucking religious autocracy in the blink of an eye, and all of our American diplomats that worked in the American consulate, they were blindfolded and fucking taken away. That's what I remember about Iran growing up, and Jimmy Carter. I mean, that's what I remember. That's the biggest thing I remember about Jimmy Carter because that was his legacy, unfortunately. And when he tried to go in and rescue people, he went into Sudan, I think it was,
Yeah, it
or
didn't go well, right? It kind of
no, we lost like 3 helicopters. A lot of people died.
yeah. See,
All the
I've heard stories, but I was not old enough to remember. He
Yeah,
was
we didn't make it. We did not make it. We had like 2 helicopters went in, and the first one crashed, and like people died. You know, it was the Navy SEAL shit, and they died. It was an overnight mission in the dark, and they fucked it up somehow. And and that really sealed his fate because he tried to make the big rescue, but when you fuck it up and you're the president, then and also the winds of change were blowing towards fucking republicanism, and what's his
well,
name came
really
in.
kind of very similar to what's happening right now because
Yeah,
I mean, the Iran thing was part of his legacy, but the other thing is inflation.
yeah.
I mean, I wasn't there for it, but I've seen videos of like the gas lines
Mm-hmm.
and the ramp, and
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about like the mortgage rates and just how horrible it was,
Oh yeah, when
inflation
I was
wise.
I don't know shit about the mortgage, but with the gas stuff, I remember at one point because my parents talked about it. They were probably in their late 30s, early 40s at the time. My brother and I were early teens, maybe 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And I remember when they talked about gas and, OPEC and the oil embargo and all that shit in Iran and everything I just talked about. But it went from like 75 cents a gallon to all of a sudden $1.50 overnight or
Oh
$1.25.
my God, a buck
Yeah, which is
50.
like a 10 spike, which is just fucking huge for most people. All of a sudden you think you can fill up your gas tank with $5. Now it's going to cost you $8. You know,
I wonder what that is like adjusted for inflation now, though. Like a dollar 50 in
from 20 to
1977.
50, probably.
Okay, I'm gonna Google this right now.
Okay, good, do because I mean,
I'm
for
gonna do it.
my gas tank, I've got a 2004 Nissan Titan pickup truck with the suicide doors in the back for a cab, and I've got about 21 gallons. And I just filled up at Costco at $2.42 a gallon. Cost me $50, just over $50, like $50 and change, to get up to 21 gallons.
Okay, so that would be the equivalent of $7.91 a gallon in today's money.
There you go.
Yeah, crazy. This is
I
not a
know.
very good in memory of. We're just listing all the failures. But honestly, like that's what I grew up in a Republican house and they didn't like him at all.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I
all I ever
mean,
heard was Jimmy Carter was shite.
right.
Um, and it wasn't until like after his presidency that you really saw like what an amazing person he was. Like he was a genuinely good person. And
Mm-hmm.
how often does a genuinely good person rise to the top of politics? Like it's almost like an
Never,
oxymoron.
never,
Never. It doesn't happen.
fucking never.
And
Yeah.
it makes you wonder if like the powers that be, and this is a little conspiratorial, but if the powers that be kind of had it in for him and wanted to sabotage his administration.
I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, yeah, I could see how they'd be like, "Fuck him, fuck this piece, Nick."
Yeah. Well,
You
and
know?
an honest actor is always going to be at a disadvantage when
Right?
going up against the monsters and ghouls that really run the show, right?
Exactly. The
So,
fucking monsters
you
and
know, he's
ghouls.
probably
You are
there taking
correct.
people seriously.
Monsters.
He's
Yeah, they
probably
are.
taking people at face value and they're
Yep.
manipulating and maybe you have to be a monster and a ghoul to I
Right.
mean, it's pretty gross though.
But he was a governor, of Georgia, and
He was a governor and a peanut farmer.
yep, and he obviously had managerial skills. He figured some shit out, and but in the end, he was just a decent human being and a habitat for humanity. And also, here is a really cool point, which is neither here nor there, but Willie Nelson got to visit the White House when Jimmy Carter was president.
Ooh, did they smoke a doobie together?
No, but Willie Nelson went on the roof of the White House with the solar panels before Reagan took them away. They had solar panels on the roof.
Are you serious? In the
Yes.
70s?
Yep, that was Jimmy Carter did that, and then Reagan fucking took them off. But
Reagan's
before
a
Reagan
idiot.
did, fucking Willie Nelson was there, and he smoked a big old spliff up on top of the White House. He fucking smoked a doobie.
You know, I like to think of Jimmy Carter up there with him, even if he
I
wasn't.
know. Even if he wasn't, I would like to think he was up there. That would be
Yeah,
nice.
me
Yeah.
too.
I mean, Jimmy smoking a spliff. I'll tell you what, Willie. Back when I was a young man in the peanut farm, that totally reminds me of, you remember SNL, of course, and that's when SNL started, was in 75, 76. Jimmy Carter was president. He was the first president during the first season of SNL, and Dan Aykroyd played him. And they did a scene.
For reals? How have
Yeah.
I never seen this? I kind of want to find out on YouTube
We
now.
should find it. Yeah, it's on YouTube. But Dan Aykroyd played him, and they were pretending to be in the Oval Office, and it was supposed to be Carter, played by Dan Aykroyd, with like Ehrlichman or one of his chief of staff or somebody, and they were taking calls from average Americans, right? It was
Yeah.
like this reach out to the people kind of a movement thing, and so they get this call from this guy who's like super high on some kind of drugs, and he's like, "I'm really freaking out, Mr. Carter, Mr. President, I don't know what to do right now." And he says, and Dan Aykroyd is Jimmy Carter. He's like, "Hold on there, Bobby. Just tell me, what did you take?" And he said, "Well, they were these little orange pills." That sounds like orange barrels. That's more of a speed-based derivative. It's going to be. He starts going through what the drug is and shit. It was so funny. But yeah, Jimmy Carter, he was, I'd say he was one of the more empathetic and feeling president.
Well,
Really understood.
yeah, like a real person.
Yeah, like a real person that was empathetic to the human condition. And we didn't see that shit. We didn't see that until I mean, way before, since FDR. Really, Delano Roosevelt was the only person that had any compassion for the American people.
Well, I would say Kennedy.
Maybe
probably
Eisenhower.
did.
Ike did.
Well, Ike did. Well, Ike had a lot of common sense, but I think Kennedy talked a
Yeah,
lot
Kennedy
about.
did. Yeah, you're
He
right.
talked a
You're
lot
right.
about universal health care, and
You're right. You're right. Yeah, I kind of made a general broad statement there, but I don't
as
know.
far as being like a genuine president, like a genuine
He's a more-
person as
yeah.
president, he's the only one within my lifetime. I mean, Gerald Ford was president when I was born, like barely.
Oh yeah,
I'm aging myself right now,
yeah.
and like I obviously have no memory of him, but the rest of them didn't seem like real people, and they still don't.
Well, no, and my first presidential memory was Nixon, and my parents. I grew up, like we've said before, in very conservative West Michigan, Lower Peninsula. Yeah, they thought Nixon was God. Like, I mean, I heard so many good things about Nixon from my mom growing up. Like, he was like Jesus's brother, basically. I mean, he was basically almost the chosen one, And then for him to have Watergate and to fall from grace like that was just like, oh my God, that was the end of the world.
Isn't it crazy that that's all it took was Watergate, though? Because
Yeah, and nowadays you can have 34 indictments and be a fucking felon and still be a president.
Oh yeah, you can send a mob to the Capitol to take over, and still, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's craziness.
I'm
I do
drinking
think I do think the scandal with Nixon is probably what led to Carter being elected, though. Because I
Yeah,
think
I
people
wouldn't
were
doubt
ready
that.
for somebody that seemed honest. His whole thing was, "I won't ever
An
lie,"
honest,
and
yeah, I want.
I don't think he ever did lie.
And no, he didn't. I don't think he did. And he was. I mean, he was a fucking purebred good boy,
Yeah, and
and with his
he was
and
over.
married to his sweetheart from high
I
school, for
know,
Christ's sake.
right? And he was overtly Christian, and how contrast that with Christians of today.
Oh yeah, and he was evangelical for the time, and which is
Yeah.
not what evangelicals are today. That's a
Well, he
whole different.
practiced it. He practiced
Yes,
it as it was meant to be practiced.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, he was a Christian man in the true sense of being a Christian man.
I mean, these days
Or
the evangelical Christians are just a tool of the Republican Party, and they'll go
indeed,
wherever the Republican Party tells them to go,
exactly.
even if it's to support somebody that's the antithesis of what they claim to believe in.
Yep. Totes McGroats. You are
Oh
correct.
yeah, rip Jimmy.
Fucking rest in peace, Jimmy.
Let's
He's one of the last great ones. Hey, pour one out for my homie.
we're gonna toast.
Toasted Jimmy.
Rip
Jimmy
Jimmy,
Carter. Rest in peace, my brother. And
legend,
your wife.
absolute fucking legend.
One of the greatest. A fucking goddamn legend.